I woke up in the hospital with internal injuries and sepsis, and the doctor looked at me and said if I went on one more job, I probably wouldn't survive.
My name is Camille Moreau. I'm 29 now, and I was in that world for about 6 years before I finally got out. I still catch myself thinking about how it all started sometimes. You know, like back when everything felt possible. I grew up in this tiny town in the south of France, nothing special. Dad baked bread every morning, Mom stayed home with me and my two brothers. We weren't poor, but we weren't going anywhere either. The same streets, the same faces, the same Sunday dinners that always tasted like last week's. I remember sitting on the front steps after school, just staring at the road that led out of town, wondering why it felt like my whole life was already written for me. I hated it. Not in some big, angry way, just this quiet, constant itch under my skin. I'd watch my mom folding laundry or chopping vegetables and think, I can't do this. I can't wake up one day and realize 40 years disappeared while I was making dinner and wiping noses. So at 16, I started making plans in my head. Big ones. I'd scroll through Instagram late at night looking at girls in Paris with their perfect outfits, traveling, laughing in clubs with lights everywhere. That was going to be me. I was sure of it. When I turned 18, I packed 2 suitcases and moved to Paris. My friend Sophie had gone up a couple years earlier, and she let me crash on her couch for the first few weeks. She was the one person I really trusted back then. We'd stay up talking about all the things we were going to do, the connections we'd make, how different our lives were going to be. I got a job bartending at this busy place near Pigalle. The hours were brutal, but the tips were decent, and the energy, God, the energy felt alive. People coming in after shows or parties dressed up, laughing too loud. I felt like I was finally in the middle of something. During the day, I'd go to castings, modeling stuff mostly, sometimes acting. I wasn't tall enough for the big runway jobs, but I thought maybe commercials or something. I'd spend hours doing my makeup, picking outfits that looked expensive but weren't, practicing my walk in the mirror. Some days I'd get called back, get my picture taken, feel like this was it. Other days, I'd sit in those waiting rooms with 20 other girls who looked just like me and feel this little twist in my stomach. But I pushed it down. I told myself it was normal, that everyone struggles at first. I had this little studio apartment eventually, tiny but mine. I'd come home after a shift, kick off my shoes, and just stand by the window looking out at the city lights. Some nights I felt so hopeful it almost hurt. I'd make coffee at 3 in the morning and plan how I was going to build this whole new life. I dated a little, nothing serious. Guys who worked in bars or did photography. They all talked a big game about helping me get ahead. I believed them because I wanted to. Looking back, there were signs things weren't perfect. Money was always tight. I'd skip meals some weeks so I could afford better clothes for castings. My family didn't really understand why I left. Mom would call and ask when I was coming home, and I'd get short with her because hearing her voice made me feel guilty. Dad? Well, I found out later he'd been seeing someone else for years. That one stung, but I didn't let it break me. I had my own stuff going on. I was so determined. I'd walk around Paris sometimes on my days off, looking at the women in the fancy neighborhoods, the way they carried themselves, the bags they carried, the restaurants they went into. I wanted that. Not just the stuff, the feeling that I mattered, that my life was bright and loud and worth noticing. I was scared of disappearing into nothing. That fear pushed me harder than anything else. I thought I was smart. I thought I was careful. I thought if I just kept showing up, kept pushing, the city would eventually open up for me. For a while, it felt like it might. Things started to feel heavier after that first year or so. At first, it was little stuff. The rent went up. Not by a lot, but enough that I had to pick up extra shifts at the bar. I'd finish at 2 or 3 in the morning, feet killing me, and still have to be up for a casting at 10. I'd sit on the metro half asleep, trying to fix my makeup in the reflection of the window. Some days I'd get there and they'd already picked someone else before I even walked in. The tips at the bar got inconsistent too. Tourists were nice, but the regulars could be cheap or handsy, and management started cutting hours when business slowed. I remember staring at my bank account one night, eating plain pasta with nothing on it, thinking, okay, just one more bad month and I'll figure it out. But the bad months kept coming. Sophie moved in with her boyfriend around that time, so I lost my person to vent to. We still texted, but it wasn't the same. I'd come home to my tiny studio and it felt quieter than before. I started scrolling more at night, comparing myself to girls who seemed to be living the exact life I wanted. That probably didn't help. I'd see them at parties I wasn't invited to, wearing clothes I couldn't afford, and this knot would form in my stomach that I couldn't shake. My parents called less and less. When they did, it was always the same questions. When are you coming home? Did you find something stable yet? I'd get defensive, tell them I was fine, that things were about to turn around. But inside, I was starting to panic. The modeling jobs were drying up. I went to a few go-sees where they barely looked at me. One guy told me I had a good look for catalog but not editorial, whatever that meant. It stung more than I wanted to admit. I tried picking up some promo work, handing out flyers, standing at events, smiling for hours. It paid okay for a weekend, but it made me feel invisible, like I was just another pretty girl in a city full of them. The exhaustion started to build up. I'd catch myself crying in the shower, not even sure why exactly. Just this heavy, tired feeling that wouldn't go away. Then there was this one winter. The heating in my building broke for almost 3 weeks. I'd wear 2 sweaters to bed and still wake up cold. My phone bill got late, then my internet got cut off for a few days. Small things, right? But they piled on. I started skipping castings because I didn't have the energy or the bus fare. I told myself I'd go to the next one, but I kept putting it off. I dated this guy for a couple months, a photographer who said he could introduce me to people. He talked a good talk, but it turned out he mostly just wanted someone to pay for half the dinners and boost his ego. When I finally ended it, I felt even more alone. I remember sitting on my bed one night, looking at my reflection in the dark TV screen, thinking, what if this is it? What if I just keep spinning my wheels until I'm 30 and still have nothing to show for it? The fear was always there, underneath everything. The fear that I'd wasted my chance, that I'd left my small town for this big dream, and the city was just swallowing me up quietly. I wasn't broken yet, but I could feel the cracks spreading. I was running out of time, running out of money, and running out of ways to convince myself everything was still on track. I kept telling myself something would turn around. I applied for other bartending jobs, better ones in nicer neighborhoods. I even tried retail for a couple weeks, but the pay was worse and my feet hurt just as bad. I reached out to every contact I had from castings, swallowed my pride, and asked if they knew anyone hiring. Most of them never wrote back. Sophie was busy with her own life, and I didn't want to keep dumping my problems on her. The bills kept coming. One night, the power company left a warning on my door. I sat on the floor staring at it for a long time, feeling this heavy weight in my chest. I thought about going back home, but that felt like admitting I'd failed, like proving everyone right. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. Then came this party. A friend of a friend invited me to this thing in the 8th arrondissement. I almost didn't go because I was so tired, but I forced myself. I figured maybe I'd meet someone useful. That's where I met him. This photographer, older guy, well-connected. We talked for a while. He seemed nice enough at first, asked about my modeling, my goals. Then he got real with me. He said the industry was tough, that pretty girls were everywhere, and if I wanted real money and real connections, I had to start playing by adult rules. I laughed it off at first, like, no way. I told him I wasn't that kind of girl. He just shrugged and said a lot of girls say that until they get tired of struggling. He mentioned some names, girls who started that way and now had careers, apartments, travel. He made it sound so casual, like it wasn't a big deal, just networking with rich guys who liked beautiful company. I left the party early that night, feeling sick to my stomach. For the next few weeks, I tried even harder to make everything else work. I took double shifts. I borrowed money from someone I barely knew. I sold some clothes on secondhand apps. But the hole kept getting deeper. I started having trouble sleeping, just lying there calculating how long I could last before I was completely screwed. He texted me a couple times. "Just checking in," he said. "No pressure." Every time I saw his name on my phone, I felt this mix of shame and hope. God, that sounds so messed up now. But at the time, Part of me kept wondering, what if it really was temporary? What if I did it smart, made some money, made some connections, and got out before anyone ever knew? I could use them instead of the other way around. It would just be business. I fought it for as long as I could. I really did. But one night, after another rejection email and another notice taped to my door, I sat there with my phone in my hand for over an hour. My hands were shaking. I typed out the message and stared at it for a long time before I finally hit send. When he replied and said he could introduce me to someone that weekend, I took a deep breath and wrote back one word: yes. The photographer sent me an address in the 16th. Nice part of town. I took the metro and walked the last few blocks in heels that already hurt. The building was one of those quiet, expensive ones with a doorman who barely looked at me. He just nodded when I said the apartment number. I went up to the 4th floor. The hallway smelled like polished wood and something floral. I stood there for a full minute before I knocked. A man opened the door. Mid-40s, nice suit, no tie. He smiled like this was normal, said my name like he'd been expecting me, offered me a drink right away. I took water. We sat in the living room. Big windows, white couches, art on the walls that looked expensive. He talked about his work, some kind of finance thing, asked me questions about modeling, about Paris, about where I was from. The conversation felt forced on my side. Long pauses where I just nodded and tried to smile. He didn't push. He just kept talking in this calm, steady voice like we were on a regular date. After a while, he stood up and said we should move to the other room. I followed. The bedroom was dim, soft lighting. He told me what he wanted in a quiet way, nothing aggressive. I nodded even though my hands were cold. I remember focusing on the corner of the nightstand, the way the light hit the glass of water he'd put there. Afterward, he got up first, went into the bathroom. I sat on the edge of the bed and put my clothes back on carefully, like if I moved too fast, something would break. When he came out, he handed me an envelope. Cash. More than I'd made in 2 weeks at the bar. He said I did fine, that we could do this again if I wanted. His voice stayed polite the whole time. I left the apartment without looking back. The doorman still didn't say anything. Outside it was cooler than when I'd arrived. I walked to the metro with the envelope in my bag, pressed against my side. On the train, I kept checking that it was still there. People around me were on their phones, laughing, living regular Friday nights. When I got back to my studio, I locked the door and sat on the floor with my back against it. The money was real. The night was real. Something inside me had shifted, and I knew it wouldn't shift back. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the dark for a long time, listening to the city outside, feeling like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. At first, I couldn't believe the money. After that first night, I paid my rent, the power bill, and still had enough left to buy groceries that weren't just pasta. A week later, another booking came through. Then another. Within a couple months, I had paid off every debt I owed and had cash in my bag that I didn't know what to do with. I moved to a better apartment. Not huge, but it had tall windows and actual furniture that didn't come from IKEA. I bought clothes that made me feel like I belonged in the places they took me. Real brands. Things I used to window shop and never touch. The clients were mostly older, successful. Some wanted dinner first at these restaurants where one plate cost more than my old weekly salary. I'd sit there in a new dress, listening to them talk about deals and politics like it was nothing. One guy flew me to London for 2 days, business class. I remember looking out the window at the clouds thinking, this is actually happening. Me, from that tiny town. There were weird moments too. One man paid me just to sit in his hotel suite and watch a movie with him. No talking, just sitting there. Another wanted me to wear specific outfits he brought and read poetry out loud. Strange requests, but they paid well. I started learning the rules fast. Don't ask too many questions. Smile. Act like everything is normal. I met other girls at a few events. We'd nod at each other across fancy rooms, knowing but never really talking. I overheard conversations about money moving between countries, about people in government, stuff that made my stomach tighten a little. These men would casually mention things most people never hear about. I'd just listen and nod. The gifts started coming. A watch, a necklace, once a handbag that I sold later when things got bad. Everything felt glamorous for a while. I'd land at airports, get picked up, stay in suites with views of the city. For the first time, I felt like I was actually living the life I dreamed about on Instagram. But little things started creeping in. A client would get too rough with his words. Another would want me to stay longer than agreed, texting my regular number even after I said no. I'd tell myself it was fine, that I was in control. I was using them. It was business. Weekends blurred together. I stopped calling my family as much. What was I supposed to say? I started sleeping during the day and working at night. My old bartending friends faded away. Sophie asked me once where I was getting all the nice things. I lied and said modeling was finally picking up. I remember one night in Monaco, standing on a balcony overlooking the water in a dress someone else paid for, champagne in my hand, thinking, I can't believe this is my life now. It felt exciting and hollow at the same time. By the end of that first year, the two lives had melted together. The girl who struggled in a cold studio felt like someone else. This was normal now. The money, the hotels, the secrets, the rules. I had crossed so many small lines I didn't even notice when I stopped counting them. Staying started to feel a lot easier than leaving. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part people don't get. It was months and then years of small shifts that added up until I barely recognized my own life. At first, the bookings were mostly okay. Some clients were even nice. One older guy in banking just wanted company for dinner and to talk about his divorce. He paid well and never touched me much. I told myself, see, this isn't so bad. But others changed things. They wanted more time, more of my attention, more control over how the night went. I learned to read a man's mood in the first 30 seconds after walking into the room. I started using different names depending on the client. Sometimes Camille, sometimes something softer. I had fake stories ready about what I did during the day, modeling, studying, helping my family. The lies came out easier every time. I'd delete messages and call logs every single night before I went to sleep. It became automatic, like brushing my teeth. My old life slipped away quietly. I missed my brother's birthday because I was in Geneva for 3 days. I told my mom I had a big modeling job. She sounded proud. I felt sick. Sophie stopped texting as much after I canceled too many plans. I didn't chase her. What was I supposed to say? The schedule wrecked me. I'd sleep until 4 in the afternoon, wake up, get ready, work until morning, then do it again. Days of the week stopped meaning anything. I'd wake up some afternoons and have to check my phone to remember what month it was. Money still came in, but I spent it faster. Nice dinners stopped feeling special. Designer bags just sat in my closet. The hotels all started looking the same. I'd check the exits now without thinking about it. Little habits I picked up. Some nights still stand out. There was the client who passed me to his business partner without asking first. They acted like it was normal. I smiled through it because I didn't know what else to do. Another time, a guy kept pushing champagne on me even after I said I'd had enough. I woke up the next morning with a headache and a bigger envelope than usual. I told myself it was fine. Then there were the ones who wanted things rougher. Not all at once, but they'd push a little more each time. I started waking up with bruises I couldn't explain. My body hurt in ways I got used to ignoring. I had 2 miscarriages during that period. The first one I handled alone in my apartment. The second one sent me to a clinic where the doctor asked questions I didn't answer. I said it was stress. They put me on antibiotics and told me to rest. I was back working 4 days later. I learned to shut parts of myself off. I'd lie there during some bookings thinking about grocery lists or what I needed to buy at the pharmacy, anything to stay detached. The numbness spread. I stopped feeling surprised by much. Men telling me their secrets about money, their wives, their enemies. I just listened and nodded like it was normal conversation. Friends from my old life were gone. I made new ones in this world, but they were surface level. We'd meet for coffee sometimes and never talk about what we really did. Everyone had their stories. Everyone had their rules. One client started recording things without telling me. I found out later when he used it as leverage to get me to see him again. He wasn't mean about it, just calm. Said it was insurance. I hated him, but I went. The threats stayed in the back of my mind after that. I crossed so many lines I stopped noticing. Things I once said I'd never do became Tuesday nights. I'd look at myself in hotel mirrors and not recognize the girl staring back. My eyes looked different, tired in a way makeup couldn't fix. Family stopped asking questions. I sent money home sometimes and said it was from modeling gigs. They probably knew something was off, but no one wanted to dig. I was grateful for that. The worst part was how normal it all started feeling. I'd land in a new city, check into a nice hotel, order room service, and it was just another workday. The excitement from the early days was long gone. Now it was just survival with better clothes. I carried cash everywhere. I deleted apps. I changed my number twice. I learned which hotels had good security and which ones didn't. I became really good at pretending everything was fine. By the time I hit 26 or 27, I had almost completely accepted it. This was my life. Not the dream I wanted, but the one I had. I'd walk through airports with my small suitcase, wearing sunglasses even inside sometimes, and feel nothing. Just the quiet knowledge that this was what my days looked like now. I wasn't the girl from the small town anymore. I wasn't even sure who I was, but I kept showing up, kept smiling, kept surviving. I almost canceled that night. Something felt off from the start. The client was someone I'd seen before through a mutual connection, but this time he wanted a different hotel and said a friend might join later. I told myself it was fine. The money was good, and I needed it. I ignored the little voice that said, "Don't go." The hotel was in the 8th, nice enough on the outside. He was already in the room when I got there, drinking. He seemed more agitated than last time, talking faster, asking questions that didn't make sense. His friend showed up about an hour in. I remember the way they looked at each other, like they had already decided something. I tried to keep things light, smiled, kept the conversation going the way I always did, but the atmosphere shifted. The friend started pouring drinks I didn't want. The client got quieter, more focused. I noticed the door was locked. I remember thinking about the exits the way I always did, but it already felt too late. What happened after that is still hard to put in order. I know there was force. I know I tried to stop it and couldn't. I remember the pressure on my neck and then nothing for a while. When I came to, the room was quieter. They were talking in low voices. Someone put clothes near me. I got dressed somehow. My body felt wrong, heavy and distant at the same time. I left the hotel on my own. I don't remember the elevator or the lobby clearly. Outside, it was still night. People were walking past, laughing, living normal lives. I sat on a bench for a few minutes trying to breathe. Then I called a cab. By the time I got home, the pain was worse. I thought it would pass. It always had before. I took some pills and tried to sleep. The next morning, I couldn't get out of bed. The fever started. By afternoon, I was shaking and everything hurt inside. I finally called an ambulance. They took me to the hospital. I remember the bright lights and someone asking questions I didn't want to answer. They ran tests. The doctor came in later looking serious. He said I had internal injuries and sepsis. He looked me straight in the eyes and said if I went back out there again, I might not survive another one like that. I stayed in the hospital for several days. Antibiotics, monitoring, quiet rooms where the only sound was machines. Outside my window, the city kept moving like nothing had happened. People walking to work, cars, life going on. When they finally let me leave, I took a cab home and sat on my bed staring at the wall. The envelope of cash from that night was still in my bag. I didn't open it. I just knew. I couldn't do this anymore. Not one more night. Not one more client. The doctor's words stayed with me. If I went back, I might not make it out next time. That was the moment every excuse I'd been using for years stopped working. Leaving wasn't one big decision. I tried 3 different times before it stuck. The first time I lasted 4 days. The money ran out and the fear kicked in. What if they came looking for me? What if the videos got out? I went back for 1 booking and hated myself more afterward. The second time, I changed my number and moved to a different neighborhood. That lasted 2 weeks until a client from before found my new contact somehow. The messages started again. Not threats exactly, just enough to make me panic. The third time was after the hospital. That doctor's words wouldn't leave me alone. I called the state clinic they referred me to and started seeing a psychologist there. Her name was Dr. Laurent. She worked with women who'd been through stuff like mine. I didn't say much the first few sessions, just sat there crying mostly. She didn't push. She just listened. I had to move again. This time farther out to the outskirts where rent was cheaper. I sold most of the nice things I'd bought. The watch, some bags. It paid for a few months while I looked for regular work. The first job I got was at a small clothing store. Folding clothes, helping customers find sizes, standing on my feet all day for minimum wage. It felt so small after everything. Some days I wanted to scream. The panic attacks came hard. I'd be ringing up a customer and suddenly feel like I couldn't breathe. Nights were worse. Nightmares where I was back in those hotel rooms and couldn't get out. I'd wake up shaking, checking my phone like I used to. I still delete messages out of habit sometimes. Old reflexes don't die easy. My body never fully recovered. There are days I have pain that the doctors say might be permanent. I get tired faster than I should. The depression sits on me like a heavy coat I can't take off. Some mornings I barely make it out of bed. Dr. Laurent says it's normal, that it takes years. I don't know if I believe her. I don't talk to men much anymore. Not dating. Not even friends, really. The trust thing. It's broken in a way that's hard to fix. I tried once, went on a coffee date with a nice guy from the store's neighborhood. I spent the whole time waiting for something bad to happen. I never called him back. My family knows pieces now. Not everything. They don't ask for details, and I don't offer them. I send money when I can, but it's not much anymore. Sophie reached out last year. We met for lunch. It was awkward. She has a normal life now, a husband, a kid. I smiled and pretended I was okay. I don't think she believed me. I still have the psychologist. Once a month, I sit in her office and talk about the same things. The shame is the hardest. I can't forgive myself for choosing it, for thinking I was smart enough to play that game and win. I traded my 20s, my health, my peace for money, and pretty rooms that meant nothing in the end. Today, I'm 29. I work at that little store 5 days a week. I live alone in a small apartment with secondhand furniture. I take the bus. I make dinner for one. Some evenings I sit by the window and watch normal people living normal lives and wonder if I'll ever feel like one of them again. The depression is still here. The memories don't leave. But I'm not going back. That much I know. If you're listening to this, I just want you to understand something. I wanted a bright life so bad I was willing to walk through fire to get it. Instead, I got pain and humiliation and memories I sometimes wish I could rip out of my brain. I survived. I'm still here, but I'll never be the girl I was before. And that's the truth.